Germany, May 1945. The war was ending, but hunger had just begun. In a bombed-out village near the Elbe River, a young woman named Margaret Fisher knelt in the rubble of what had been her family's bakery, searching for grain between shattered bricks. Her hands trembled, not from cold, but from weakness. She weighed 78 pounds. When the American jeep rolled into the square, dust rising behind it like a curtain, she expected nothing. Liberation meant chaos. Freedom meant starvation. But then a sergeant stepped out, looked at her for a long moment, and said three words that would change everything. The spring of 1945 came to Germany without mercy. Fields lay low, cities smouldered, and the roads filled with millions of displaced souls moving in all directions at once. Soldiers surrendering, refugees fleeing, survivors searching. In this chaos, hunger became the new enemy, more ruthless than any army. Margaret Fisher was 23 years old. Before the war, she had been a school teacher in the small town of Toga, 40 miles northeast of Leipzig. Her father had run the town bakery for 30 years. Her mother had taught piano lessons in their parlor overlooking the Elbe. Her younger brother Klaus had been conscripted in 1943 and died at Stalingrad. The family never recovered. By April 1945, Toga had become a ghost. The bakery had been requisitioned by the Wehrmacht in 1944, then bombed by Allied aircraft in February 1945. Her father had died of a heart attack in the cellar during the raid. Her mother had simply stopped eating, fading away in March like a photograph left in the sun. Margaret found herself alone in a town that no longer existed, surrounded by rubble, and the constant sound of artillery growing closer. The Americans arrived on April 25th. She remembered the date because it was her mother's birthday. The fighting was brief. The remaining German defenders, mostly old men and boys, surrendered within hours. Then came the occupation. Jeeps rolled through streets lined with broken buildings. Soldiers set up checkpoints. Military police began registering civilians. Margaret had hidden in the bakery cellar for 3 days after the Americans came, not from fear of violence but from exhaustion. She had nothing left, no family, no home, no food. The cellar walls still smelled of flour and yeast, phantom scents from another lifetime. She survived on rainwater collected in a tin bucket and 3 potatoes she had buried in ash. On the 4th day, she climbed the cellar stairs. The sunlight blinded her. The square was unrecognizable. Rubble had been pushed to the sides. American trucks lined the street. Soldiers moved with purpose, setting up tents, unloading supplies. The sound of their voices, foreign and sharp, filled the air. She stood there swaying slightly. Her dress hung on her like fabric on wire. Her hair, once thick and dark, had grown brittle. Her reflection in a broken window showed a stranger, hollowed-eyed and grey. That's when she saw him. Sergeant William James Barker of the 69th Infantry Division, 3rd Army, 31 years old. From a small farm outside Tulsa, Oklahoma. He had landed at Utah Beach 11 months earlier and fought his way across France, through the Ardennes, across the Rhine. Margaret, teacher, family dead, alone. The interpreter, whose name was Herr Schmidt, explained the situation. Thousands of German civilians had no food, no shelter, no means of survival. The occupation forces provided basic rations at distribution centers, but supplies were limited and chaos reigned. People fell through the cracks. Margaret was one of them. William made a decision that would have gotten him court-martialed if his commanding officer had known. He started bringing Margaret food every day, not just rations. Real food from the army mess, bread, eggs, sometimes soup in a thermos. He would find her in the square, sit with her while she ate, then leave. She began to gain weight slowly. Her cheeks filled out slightly. Color returned to her face. But more than physical recovery, something else was happening. The evening light made everything look soft, unreal. "Come with me," he said. She looked at him, not understanding. "When I leave, come with me to America." It was an insane suggestion. There were regulations, laws, military protocols. Enemy nationals couldn't just immigrate. Fraternization was officially discouraged. Marriage between occupying soldiers and German civilians was complicated, difficult, sometimes impossible. But William was serious, completely serious. How? She asked. I don't know yet, but I'll find a way. Over the next week, William investigated every possible avenue. He talked to chaplain, to officers, to Red Cross officials. The answer was always the same: possible, but difficult. There were procedures, applications, background checks. It could take months, maybe years, and most importantly, marriage was required. He proposed to her on June 20th, 1945, in the ruins of her family's bakery. No ring, no elaborate speech, just a simple question. Margaret, will you marry me and come to Oklahoma? She said yes before he finished the sentence. The wedding was arranged quickly through the military chaplain. Chaplain Robert Morrison, originally from Michigan, had performed dozens of such marriages. He understood that love bloomed in strange places during war, that sometimes survival and affection became inseparable. The ceremony took place on June 27th in a small, undamaged church on the outskirts of Atoga. Margaret wore a dress provided by Red Cross volunteers. William wore his dress uniform. The witnesses were Corporal Danny Reeves and Herr Schmidt, the interpreter who had facilitated their first real conversation. The chaplain spoke in English, then German, then English again. Do you, William James Barker, take this woman? Do you, Margaret Fisher, take this man? They did. They said the words. They signed the papers. After the ceremony, William took both of Margaret's hands in his. His face was serious, intense. You're mine now, he said in English. Here's Schmidt translated. The phrase in German sounded different. Protective, rather than possessive. Daggerhurst, yet. You belong to me now. Not as property, but as family. As someone to be cared for, protected, brought home. Margaret understood. She was his responsibility now, and he was hers. In a world that had fallen apart, they were building something together. The paperwork began immediately. Military bureaucracy moved with glacial slowness, but the chaplain and several sympathetic officers expedited what they could.